Alright, good morning. I made a video yesterday about how the Civil War was about slavery and not about states' rights. And I got a pretty interesting reply. I was kind of half asleep when I read the reply, but the crux of the reply was it was rather long and rather long-winded, long-winded, I guess, right? I don't know. Some of these words you only read and you don't hear. It's long-winded. I've heard it. It's long-winded. So anyhow, the answer that this comment was basically like this. The leadership, maybe it was about slavery, but for the average soldier who went out to fight, it was about states' rights, because the average Confederate soldier didn't own slaves, which is true. And really, the statement is true. But that doesn't mean that that's what the war was about, meaning wars are very rarely about what... Well, let me let these flies out of here. I don't know how they got in here. Wars in general are very rarely, and I think people are mostly aware of that, they're very rarely about what the common soldier believes. They're about what the leaders who are sending those soldiers out believe. I mean, I think it's pretty much common sense. I remember I used to speak at the local college when I lived in Richmond. Professor Smith's course on world religion, and Professor Smith would always say that religions don't start wars. They're used as a tool and an excuse for the wars. So an example would be the Crusades. These weren't, most Protestant Christians today would say that those folks who were going out and pillaging and so forth, those are not true Christians by their estimation. And what they were doing was not very Christian. But what they basically did was for a lot of the people, they used this religious imagery for political gain. Now, for sure, the Nazis did that. And quite often, now, at least in the case of the Crusades, for the most part, the people were pretty much on the same page religiously. They just had different approaches and different goals and so forth, but they were pretty much on the same page. But when it came to the Nazis, it was often on the opposite pages. I mean, if you really see what Hitler had to say, he was against, he was bipolar on his approach to Christianity, because on one hand he couldn't totally speak out against Christianity, and so he would often say things that identified himself as a Christian, sometimes identified himself as a Catholic, even though Germany was not a Catholic country. And sometimes, but on the other hand, when you saw what he really felt, he was a pagan. He pushed a neo-pagan ideology and also opposed Judeo-Christian values, and he saw, to a certain extent, Christianity as an extension of Judaism that, by teaching laws like thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not steal, and so forth, weakened, the ancient pagan people who believed in murdering and stealing and so forth. I mean, that's what it was really all about. He once said that the Ten Commandments were a blemish like circumcision, and he there was quite a big fight against the Ten Commandments in Nazi Germany on many times. Sometimes openly and sometimes secretly. The Ten Commandments were a target of the Nazis, and the major reason why the Nazis hated the Jews was because the Jews brought the Ten Commandments. Now, we could discuss a little bit more about that. Why were the Ten Commandments a target of the Nazis? Was because, like we said, the Nazis wanted to bring back, they were essentially neo-pagans, and they wanted to bring back the old pagan religions, and they were very much involved in occult practices and so forth. But if the average German would know that, they would be appalled, and they wouldn't have any interest in that. So there had to be this dichotomy of Christianity and paganism, meaning for the average person to claim that it was a Christian movement when in truth it was the exact opposite. And so too, we could say, with this issue of the Confederacy. Now, I wouldn't go so far as to say that the average Confederate soldier opposed slavery, although some did. And the fact is, Lee opposed slavery. And he also opposed secession, but just he was in this predicament where he was stuck to be the general. And it was also thanks to him that the war ended, that he was willing to accept the end of the war at Appomattox on friendly terms. And for that reason alone, Lee was a hero. And, if Malcolm X could be a hero, as he is in many circles, not to me, but the United States Postal Service honored Malcolm X with a postage stamp and so forth, and many people see him as a hero, not for his criminal actions, but because he turned his life around, when he left Nation of Islam and joined Sunni Islam. I believe he was a Sunni. And so therefore, he left the racist ideology of NOI and adopted non-racist or less racist ideology, or ideally non-racist ideology of mainstream Islam, which is quite different from Nation of Islam in many ways. Or rather, Nation of Islam is extremely and radically different than traditional mainstream Islam. Excuse me. And that's why he was killed, for a great part, because after he went on the Hajj and he saw that there were Muslims of all different races and so forth, so then he dropped the racist ideology and he became transformed to a different person. Now, still, you could argue on what he came out with, but in a way, Lee was much more, historically a heroic person than Malcolm X, because most of his life, as opposed to Malcolm X, most of his life he was a scoundrel, and near the end of his life, he had, a come to Allah moment, and he changed, parts of his ideology in ways that might be seen as noble, and he is, seen by many people, I work in a state institution, and one of my supervisors, very friendly guy, someone who I admire very much, he has a picture of Malcolm X up on the wall, and I don't think he's respecting Malcolm X because of his criminal background. Of course not, but rather because he overcame that, which he, his racist ideology, and transformed himself. Now, Robert E. Lee, for most of his life, was a heroic person. And in many ways, the union that we have today, we can thank Lee for. So this question of removing statues of Lee and so forth, have to be questioned. I myself, I lived in Richmond for a while, and I feel a very close connection to Richmond. I would go down Monument Avenue, and which was not far from my home, and that was a major thoroughfare where there were many of these monuments, all up and down Monument Boulevard, and there were Confederate monuments, and there were monuments to great African Americans, and there were monuments to scientists, and so forth. There was a statue of Arthur Ashe. It was, and to me, having both, being more inclusive rather than one or the other, had its place. And many people, have respect for people like Stonewall Jackson and Robert E. Lee and so forth, who are very complicated figures, just like many other heroic figures, and many aspects of what people know about. And some of these other folks were horrible scoundrels their whole life, and have to know the history. But the thing is, the point I want to bring out is how people are used. There's this video that's going around that was originally made in 1943, and it was updated in 1947. Don't be a sucker. And Glenn Beck quoted it on his show and so forth. It's really a great piece. It was an Army film, an Army training film originally, and it's in the past week or so has somewhat gone viral, and it really brings out, how people become quote unquote suckers, but how and their lives could be ruined by following these demagogues. But there's more to it than that. There's this cognitive dissonance of the truth of history and where these people wind up. Meaning, why would somebody who would vote Republican which most of these people don't. Most of these people, they support the Reform Party and so forth. They're mostly third-party type people. I don't think, when you look at the vast majority of these KKK people and neo-Nazis and so forth who were marching in Charlottesville, most of them probably did not vote Republican. Most of them don't support Donald Trump. And they say they wish there was someone who was like Donald Trump, but much worse, quote unquote. But then he wouldn't be like Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is not like these people. He has nothing to do with these people. And, they're carrying, some of them, they're carrying the rebel flags. That's the Democrat flag. Meaning, why would someone who is from the right be carrying a flag that was always associated with the Democratic Party in its entire history? Why? Now, is it about states' rights? Is it about what are we talking about here? Is it about states' rights? Is it about slavery? Is it about... Now, the thing is, it's like this. It's like I said. It's like this commentator said. Yeah, for the average Confederate soldier, it was about states' rights. But for the leadership of the Confederacy, it was not. And so these people were like in this movie, Don't Be a Sucker. They were suckers. Because the Constitution of the Confederacy opposed states' rights. He said, don't look at a history book that's recent. I'm not looking at a recent history book. I'm looking at the first, at a primary source, the Constitution of the Confederacy, which said that states in the Confederacy do not have the right to choose to abolish slavery within their own state. And so this term Confederacy was really a crock, because meaning it was one of these ironic terms, really, just like how these same people today call themselves progressives, and they're really regressive. They really want to go back, just like the Nazis want to go back to neo-paganism. They want to go back to the old totalitarian ways, meaning, in the ancient times, or medieval times, was monarchies and so forth. So maybe it wouldn't be monarchies, but still to have the most power among the least amount of people. That's what the quote-unquote progressives want. They really want to regress to the old way. It's nothing new. It's nothing progressive. It's regressive. But they call themselves progressives, and it's an ironic term, essentially. By creating these oligarchies of large government, instead of ensuring the rights of the individual. And so too, you would think the term Confederacy means that it's not as strong of a union as the Union, meaning the United States is, went under the new Constitution to form a more perfect union as opposed to Articles of Confederation, which were a less perfect union. And so the Confederate States wanted to say, well, we are going back to this less perfect union to give states more rights, and yet they deprive them of the right to choose in their Constitution, to choose whether or not you could be a free state or a slave state, as opposed to the original Constitution, which provided that provided that choice in order to create this more perfect union. Meaning, for the sake of union, that's why they allowed this, that so many people opposed, including the common people in many of these southern states. But since they were not landowners and so forth, they didn't have a voice. And things changed over time. And there was authentic progress over time, and there was the goal of eventual progress, meaning, people are saying, there was this video that came out from Vice, and it showed how horrible and evil these crazy, sick KKK and Nazi people are. Most of them, certainly many of the ones that they interviewed. But then they had a young African American woman who was saying, well, we see the master looking down from Monticello. She's talking about Thomas Jefferson. When I brought that up to someone, they're like, oh, Thomas Jefferson wasn't that great. What are you talking about? Thomas Jefferson? First of all, Thomas Jefferson is someone that can bring this country together, because he has many aspects of the American right and many aspects of the American left, and he should be. It's similar to really what I've been saying about, although I'm not comparing Donald Trump to Thomas Jefferson, but in many ways Donald Trump is a person who should be a uniter. That's the point. What he's saying is that, if you listen to what he actually said, he said, we got to put aside our differences and recognize that there are good and bad on both sides, and that's true. It is true. And we have to make compromises. And we have to find common grounds that we can all live with, And the thing is, if you really get into what's really happening here, it's quite obvious that this whole thing is just stagecraft, and trying to bring down this country. There's one fellow, an old capo, who was involved in this stuff, who has destroyed other countries' economies for his own gain and so forth. Talking about George Soros, we know, and he has enough money. I wouldn't be surprised if his fingerprints weren't behind these quote-unquote white supremacists, or again, if many of these people weren't being misled, and brainwashed as sheeple to be really just pawns in this bigger scheme. And Soros doesn't care that people get killed. He doesn't care what he destroys. And again, most likely he's funding what's going on behind, and he has all these different organizations that he funds and so forth, and he can hide what's really going on, and he's using this as a way to create unrest. And it's all by design. It's quite possible. I'm not saying necessarily that's what's happening. We don't know. I'm not, but it makes sense that that's most likely what's going on, because why are these people getting so much attention now? They're insignificant. They're nobodies. They don't deserve the attention that they're getting. Except that the media wants to give them attention, wants to create these problems, wants people to die in the street in order to destroy this whole country. It's not about Donald Trump, it's about America altogether. That they want to totally transform what America's all about. They had their man in the White House who was doing George Soros' bidding for a while. And now that he's out and that they weren't able to get Clinton in, they weren't able to get Soros' people in, so Soros is trying to go from behind and destroy it. So this is what people have to be aware of. How there is this intentional push to overthrow, and how people are being used, meaning quite often the exact opposite, meaning just like we saw with the Confederates, meaning the goals of the leadership of the Confederacy were not states' rights, but they convinced people to support them by making it states' rights. And many other, so the same thing, for lack of a better term, these puppet masters on the left are using both sides for their gain, and everyone winds up being a sucker. So that's why people have to wake up and recognize what's really going on. And the thing is that what we got to realize when it comes to these things is not to jump to conclusions, but rather recognize theories as theories and not as fact until they get proven, and recognize that there are many different possibilities and not automatically say this is what it is. And when that's the approach that we take, we can be much wiser, we can be much better informed, and we can protect ourselves better from falling into these traps and retain our independence. There was no point in me doing that. As independent thinkers, and not get fooled, not be dopes, not be suckers. And so, yes, to the commentator, and I don't remember your name, but I thank you for commenting. Yes, you're right. The average soldier who got up and fought for the Confederacy thought it was about states' rights, but it wasn't about states' rights. The average, and so too, many people who get riled up on either side are just being suckers. And it's time for us to take back our independence and not become suckers, not become fools, not become stooges to people who just want to use us and not help us. And the thing is in general, any politician who says, I'm going to fight for you, I'm going to help you, that's someone who's just going to use you. But if they say, this is, I want you to have freedom, I want to give the keys back to you, that's what we need. That's one of the first things Trump said in the beginning, and by his inauguration and so forth. Now the power is going back to the people. And these idiots who, they have to understand, KKK is a left-wing organization. It's part of the Democrat Party. Nazism is a left-wing ideology. It's a different it's a different prong of the left, right? It's obviously, just like we said yesterday, there are always warring factions. The same thing was with the Soviets. You had the Leninists and the Trotsky, and these different sides were fighting each other. And that's what happens in these cases, But, it is what it is. So, So too, just because the Nazis are on the left doesn't make all leftists Nazis, you know. And also there are different left-right dynamics. There's what the Europe considers, you know, in Europe there's really only a left. There's only just two sides of the left. In America, we have really the authentic right and left paradigm. Meaning in America you have the American right is the constitutional right, the independent freedom right, and the individualist right, whereas the American left is the collectivist left. In Europe, they're all collectivist. And just the question is, are you a nationalist or an internationalist? Are you, whereas to a real American, this question of nationalism versus internationalism is irrelevant. Because if it's in the interest of the individual to have international connections, so then you can be both, you know, recognizing your own nation and culture. And I mean, it's the same thing with religion. You know, a person can be 100% loyal and believing in their own religion and accept just the plain fact of the matter that's out of their control that other people have other religions. Now, if someone is looking for a new religion and they call, you know, whatever it is, so you could go and tell them, well, maybe you want to think of my religion, you know. And we have this fluidity in America that you can change your religion and so forth. It's not like it is in other countries where it's much more difficult to change your religion. You know, I have one of my patients, he insists that religion and race are totally intertwined. And my feeling is just the opposite, you know, and to the point where he would say that religions are not race-based, they're not religions. I'm obviously, it's a person, I work in a mental hospital, a person's mentally ill, but you know, these are the kind of nonsense where these ideas don't exist in a bubble. They don't, quite often they come from some kind of source, and I don't know what the source is. I don't know where it comes from. You know, this person is a big challenge to me, you know, because, like, you know, we whatever it is, it's neither here nor there how to discuss these issues. And it's not my job to change his views. It's my job to recognize that there are different views and that this person's mentally ill, you know. It's not, so whatever, it is what it is, you know. But I think everybody should really hear. I haven't heard anybody say that what Trump said is wrong, but rather that it's what he's hinting to, the quote-unquote dog whistles and this and that, and what's really behind the scenes of what he's thinking. I mean, this is a guy from Manhattan. This is a guy who has grown up in a diverse society, who has always been nothing but respectful to a diverse society. This is a man who was able to maintain throughout his life friendships with people from diverse backgrounds. And the left has to recognize that there's two diversities. It's not just your diversity. There are many diversities within the world that we have. There are, you know, meaning, yes, there are religious fanatics, and there's nothing you can do about it. They're not going to go away, no matter what you want. And as much as these leftists, these Antifa, all these different groups would like to see people believe in the Bible just disappear. We're not going to disappear. We're going to keep clinging to our Bibles, like, no matter what anybody says. And so you have to be respectful of the fact that there are different ideologies, different views in the world, both in the right and the left. Now, if someone is going to use it for violence or for evil or for criminal activity, they have to face the consequences. And they have no excuse. But you can't change everybody's minds just like that. Now, every now and then, folks will change their minds on their own. They'll see what different views are and they'll come to conclusions and they will change their minds. But you can't force it. You can't put people into camps and indoctrinate them and brainwash them. It has to be organic, it has to be grassroots and so forth. And the fact of the matter is that these extreme groups are a small, infinitesimal minority. And they're not gaining any sympathy. They're not gaining any strength. But that doesn't change the fact that many of the people who oppose them are also criminals and evil. But for the most part, on both of these sides, the average person who gets involved in these groups is a sucker, is a dummy, is a sheeple, is part of the sheeple. They're just being fooled. And if they really knew what was going on, this happens on a local level as well. If people really knew what was going on, how they're being used for their purposes, they would see it's just the opposite, meaning the people who are really behind a lot of these groups are more often than not believing in the exact opposite of what the masses that they gain around them believe in order to use them. And if people will wake up to that fact, they wouldn't want to have anything to do with them. And so that's why we need to have a return to individualism, and overcome prejudices and so forth. And we all have to recognize the prejudices that we have. This morning, stopped to get gas, and I see a pickup truck, and the guy has one of those Darwin fish on it, and I was like, the thought that went through my mind is like, a non-religious redneck? What's this world come to? Then I realized, no, he's not really a redneck, he's just a guy from the city, who moved upstate. As a lot of folks are, especially in these areas, because we're not that far from the city. But on the other hand, that's none of my business, because this is America and we have freedom, and if he wants to be non-religious, that's his right, and there's nothing I can do about it. As long as we can live in peace, side by side, we don't have to be friends, but we have to be neighbors, and we have to be good neighbors. And we have to have this sense of love thy neighbor, meaning even if we don't know them, we have to look to it. Someone asked me yesterday, I got a call about performing an unveiling ceremony. And And then this fellow, who obviously is Jewish, is unveiling and not religious, he asked me what's my take on what's going on with Trump and this and that. And I got very uncomfortable. And I was like, I'm not private about my political views, but I try to keep my politics and my ministry separate. And I was kind of squirming and kind of uncomfortable, and I said, well, I think he's being misunderstood, and I think he's having a hard time expressing himself. And I don't think he means what everyone thinks he means. And that's true. But I think he really has expressed himself well. It's just that the media is playing it. They're taking one quote out of context and so forth. And that's really what's going on here. Why? Because there's an agenda, and it's to take down, not only to take down Trump, but to take down America. I mean, when you can hear the good guy, quote unquote, in a presentation insulting Thomas Jefferson, a man who wanted to abolish slavery, but he knew that it wouldn't be possible if you did it right away. Meaning, if you didn't form, and he always regretted for the rest of his life that it was just one vote away from abolishing slavery. But the fact of the matter was, at that time and the place, it was impossible. And as horrible and disgusting and despicable as it was, America would not be America today. Meaning, what would you rather have? Would you rather have one united America that within 90 years would abolish slavery? Or would you have two Americas, one without slavery and one that would continue having slavery for another 200 years? Maybe even longer. Probably longer. Probably till today. If it wasn't for the foresight of the Founding Fathers to compromise on that issue, there would probably be two countries today, one of which would have slavery. There would not have been this setup to have the Civil War, and the Civil War was not. It was about slavery. It wasn't just about economics. They wouldn't have fought a war over the economic differences of the North and the South. If anything, they both needed each other. There was a symbiotic relationship that existed between North and South that made it necessary to either have a union or to have some kind of a free trade agreement between the North and the South. But what probably would have happened, if not for the compromises the founders made, was there would probably still be slavery today in the South. It was because they had the foresight to create this union that eventually led, with a goal of eventually abolishing slavery, is why we have what we have today. There wouldn't have been a civil war. There wouldn't have been a war to maintain a union that never formed. That's one thing. And so, what about Jefferson himself? He owned slaves, and not only that, but at least Washington freed his slaves upon his death. Why didn't if Washington could free his slaves upon his death, why couldn't Jefferson free his slaves upon his death? And the answer is, it was illegal for him to do so because he was a debtor, and the law in Virginia at the time was that if you had debts, you were not allowed to free your slaves even upon death. That was the law. So Washington did not have the debts that Jefferson had, and that was it. That's the truth. And Jefferson wanted to free his slaves altogether. But what was he going to do? He's just going to sell them? You're not allowed, if you had debts, you were not allowed to free your slaves. You would have to sell them to pay your debts. And he didn't want to do that. Because how does he know how the next guy is going to treat the slaves? So maybe he was protecting them from a much worse master. I don't think there's any indication that Jefferson was a cruel slave master. No. When the Bible speaks of slavery, it talks about how you have to treat your slaves properly. They are human beings. You know, a lot of folks are like, well, the Bible condones slavery. Well, that was the fact of the matter in those days. If they tried to get rid of it, it wouldn't have worked. Nobody would have listened. You know, and God knew that. He knew the society that he was giving the Torah to. And so instead, he introduced this radical idea that slaves had human rights. And that the free man and the slave were actually equals. And we see this later in other texts, both in our tradition and other traditions that are rooted in our tradition. That there is no difference between the free man and the slave. We are all the servants of God. We're all, you know. And so there was this idea of remembering, giving, you know, the whole idea that a slave had the Sabbath, had a day off. That was totally revolutionary. You know, although there's an interesting legend that Moses advised Pharaoh to give the slaves a day off so they could work more. You don't want to work them to death and so forth. But in ancient times, you know, there's a system of progress, and I believe that the Torah wanted us to eventually get rid of slavery, phase it out. But just like the founders understood that it needed to be in a process, of course God understood that when God wrote the Torah. And so but not only that, but it was helpful to the Canaanite slaves to get them out of their pagan culture and bring them into a biblical culture. Meaning, most likely, their lives, the Canaanite slave, his life would be better as a slave to an Israelite master than his life would have been as a common Canaanite who was enslaved to his chieftain, to his government anyway. And so it's to bring him out of this pagan culture and bring him in the process of entering into a biblical culture with morals and ethics that did not exist in Canaan. Alright, well, and again, of course, we want to get rid of it, but it's an unfortunate fact of the matter. And the other thing is, as the Constitution itself says, in a way, this form, for example, we have also the Hebrew slave, which is more like an indentured servant. He has only a limited time in his servitude, and it was generally done as a punishment for a crime. And what we see now in America is, what do? You lock people up with other criminals. If you weren't a criminal when you got into the system, you're going to be one when you get out. Instead, go live with a family, get a job, you know, have a role model to look up to, And then when you're freed, go back into society, and now you have the tools for re-entry. I mean, now, the prison systems are improving with educational systems and educational programs and so forth, and rehab programs and all kinds of things that are very important and really embracing that old biblical standard. But the idea of indentured servitude was essentially, a much better model. Because it was a model which gave people upward mobility. Thank you for watching, and really we were hoping that the whole society should have upward mobility, upward toward our Father in heaven, that we should all have true progress. And the true progress is to remove all of the difficulties of humanity and embrace that come through sin, and embrace a godly way of life, a standard to live up to, and recognizing God's love for us, for each and every individual. And in that way, we can bring this world to overcome all of these hate groups, whether it's, and they're all evil, whether it's the Nazis, whether it's the KKK, whether it's Antifa, Black Panthers, whatever these groups are. Overcome the hate, and embrace the love of Almighty God. All right, thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe.